Good afternoon and welcome into the Take Up. Today we have episode 138 Expansion in Education, Equipment, Skills, and Setup. Good afternoon, folks, and welcome into the Take Up. Glad to have you here on this Education Friday coming up toward the end of the year. Not my last episode just yet. I'm very likely going to have an episode next week for the people who want to hang out. But this is kind of coming up to the end of the year. And really, this is a topic that comes pretty hot at the end of the year. What should I do for expansion in the coming year? So it's not just about plotting and planning for what we're going to do with our business, but a lot of people are out buying equipment right now. They're trying to get in that last little bit of equipment before the tax year ends. So if the case they have tax benefits that are coming from that, or they're just trying to find some deals, they're trying to do some work, knowing that in the slower part of the year, lots of people have seasonal slowdowns. Sometimes in January, they can do work of getting things installed and upgraded, or they might be looking at skills. We talked about not just equipment, but education. They're looking at skills. They're looking at the upcoming trade show season and wondering, hey, what can I do to improve my offerings, to improve my business in the coming year? So for those of you that are here, they're able to break away from the production for a little while. We're going to just kind of have an informal discussion about this to some degree. Won't be a ton of references. There'll just be me answering questions because I continually get questions about equipment, questions about what I would add to a shop, questions about how I make those evaluations when I'm talking to people who are adding equipment to the shop. And some of this will cover some of the same stuff we discussed a little bit last week when we talked about different methods of selling embroidery, different methods of decorating, and how do we market ourselves and how do we work with our audience. So audience and context, things like that are certainly important. But I'll certainly tread some old ground. I've talked about how we choose machines and how we choose who we're working with many a time, but I'm also going to talk about skills, why we bring certain skills in, why we train ourselves up for certain things, and when that makes sense. And also kind of the different sides of this that we're fighting in ourselves as far as our desire to learn new things, our desire to do certain kinds of work, our desire to bring certain kinds of equipment in, and what that means to the business world, to the personal creative world, and how we can kind of reconcile those different forces within ourselves as we go out there as decorators trying to figure out what it is we're going to do. So in any case, we're going to talk about all of the above in different ways. We'll discuss the different kind of fights that I've had over the years with people kind of recommending different things as far as equipment goes, as far as additions go, and how I try to keep my head on my shoulders seated well and pointed in the right direction, considering it's very, very easy when we're going into the trade show season to see all of the new and awesome things that are out there and think that I need to involve myself in every single one. So first off, as I always do, folks, before we get into the meat of the show, I like to say hi to the people who are here. So if you are here live, I would love to hear your experiences and love to hear your questions. By all means, derail me, especially these last two shows of the years. I really like to say, hey, jump in, ask these questions, jump in with your own insights. And I'd love to hear from you guys. How did you choose the machine that you went with? How did you choose the companies that you work with, the vendors you work with? And what did it mean to you to kind of work around those concepts of where do I expand? What do I bring in-house? What skills do I want to learn? And I would love to hear more about that from you folks anyway. So jump in, leave comments, but I'm going to say hi to the folks who are here already and who are checking in. So Cindy King out of Texas says, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Cindy. Glad to have you here. Frank Dunn, awesome community sharer and leader. Thank you for being here, Frank. So out in the UK, doing the good work as always. Ramona is in also. Ramona, who's going to talk about this on her show to some degree. She's talking about moving from home style equipment, home prosumer level equipment up to full commercial style embroidery machines tomorrow on her show, Coffee and Conversation. So check her out if you get a chance. Hello, everyone. I think that's Gail from Kingsbury Crafts, so I remember correctly. And we got Frank coming in on all different channels. Thanks, Frank. Lena says, I love this. Lena says, I love that intro music. Gives me a good vibe for my Saturday morning education. Good morning, Eric, and thank you. Good morning, Lena. Glad to have you in as well. So I'm glad you have that good feeling. I'm happy to bring that to you. Mark says, good afternoon from Florence, Arizona. Good afternoon, Mark. We got Marta in from Texas. Glad to have you in. Jesse is in from Cyclone, West Virginia. Coolest sounding town for darn sure. And yeah, we'll go ahead and give you this comment. This is always great. Ramona says, FYI, don't get caught up in the hype of machine marketing. The job is there to sell the machine. Yeah, the job there is to sell the machine. Yeah, remember that somebody's selling something to you. I don't want to say that people are disingenuous. They're not. There are wonderful people working for machine manufacturers. Just make sure you understand that they are manufacturers. Uh, each one of us who works for a company, and I'll be clear, you guys know I work for Embrilliance and do work there and have given a lot of myself to the products that we build. Of course, I'm going to tell you all the good stuff. And it's not that we're not going to let you see all the warts of the thing that we're actually working on and all the work that's being done behind the scenes. But of course, I'm going to show you the stuff that I love about it. Same thing though. I will be the first to say I have used multiple brands. You know, I've got a ZSK machine behind me in my images all the time. I love ZSK machines. Love them. Work on one now. Would love to work on more in the future. However, I'm always honest that I've worked on a lot of different machines and really Tajima and Baradin for most of my career. Tajima the most. Doesn't mean that other machines can't do the job. Lots of people love different kinds of machines. And one of my favorite machines is not available anymore. The one that I kind of cut my teeth on doing my most detailed work was an old Brother commercial machine. Back when Brother made metal commercial embroidery machines, I had one of those that I worked on and learned a lot on. BAS 415, 9-needle commercial machine from Brother that cannot be bought now. And by the way, if you see one and people are offering it, even at a fire sale, be careful because there are no parts. So that's one of those things. Do machines differ? Yes. Can you do great work on most of the machines that are there? Yes. What's going to be the most important? We'll get into it again later, but the thing that's going to be most important for you is probably your experience with the manufacturer and service long term. So we'll get into that. But for everyone who's wondering, yeah, I mean, yes, everybody has favorites. I don't think that the machine manufacturer wars are real. Certainly people are going to come to you with the thing they're selling and give you the best points of it. But those of us who've been in the industry for some time, I've used every manner of software. I've used every manner of machine you can imagine. I've been on just about all of them. Aside from, of course, when there are lots of kind of clone machines with random manufacturers, maybe not, but a lot of those are kind of Tajima style heads and they're pretty similar. I've been on a lot of machines and definitely I have run a fair number of stitches through kind of the top big three brands that I always talk about, like ZSK and Tajima and Baradin. I've run a lot of those and a little of Melco and honestly, a little bit of really old Melco too. So machine manufacturers, yeah, don't get caught up in the marketing necessarily, but listen to the marketing and ask pointed questions. We're going to get there. All right. We have a couple more people. Jenny is saying, hello from Southeastern North Carolina. What shows are out there? What states? I'll just say the ones I'm going to right now are going to be, we're going to ISS. The old show that used to be called ISS, it is now Impressions Expo. It's been Impressions Expo for a little while. Impressions is out in Long Beach, California. That's where I'm going in January. In February, I will be out in Kansas City. And that's for the DAX shows. In fact, I'll bring those up really quickly since I'm talking about shows. Might as well. We'll add those to the stream. I have some other stuff I'm going to talk to you guys about. But the two shows that I currently am talking about are the first two that I'm going to be at. That's Impressions Expo out in Long Beach, California. And I will actually be teaching. It says the 20th to the 22nd. I'm actually going to be there on the 19th teaching because my longer workshop happens on the day before the show start. So that's where I'm starting out. January 19th will be the first day that I'm teaching, and I'm teaching a few different sessions. So digitizing your first design, finding your foundations, in-house and outsourced, digitizing solutions, vintage values, machine embroidery, style, stitches, and segments, and presenting embroidery's value proposition. That's all happening for me in January. And also for me in February, and actually all of these different dates you see here, we have Kansas City, Treasure Island, Minnesota, Tinley Park. I will be there for all of the DAX shows. So these are all happening throughout, but February 24th and 25th, Kansas City DAX, I will be out there teaching. And once again, we got our seminar track here. You scroll on down, you'll see me build up your digitizing design elements and execution. That's the one I'm doing on the 23rd. So once again, on that day before. And then I'm also teaching another one later on, Embroidery RX, a digitizer's view. So how to deal with problems in your embroidery designs from a digitizer's view. Those are the ones that I'm teaching. So we'll talk more about trade shows and what to expect at trade shows a little bit, and a little bit about, what we're going to get into when we're looking at machinery at trade shows, and kind of how to keep our heads about us, how to keep ourselves on a level while we're looking at new equipment. But those are the shows that I'm going to. If you're wondering where you're going to see me, check out Impressions Expo. 2 shows there, very likely going to be doing Fort Worth as well. So Fort Worth, Texas, so that's way later in the year. And then the 3 shows for DAX are the other ones aside from Long Beach. So that's what's going on. Let's see. We've got a couple more people who are in here. Pam says, I'm all ears for info. Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. Everybody's talking to each other. Love that. Barb's talking to everybody. So hi, Barb. Happy to hear you there. Kathy's in from Vero Beach, Florida. Awesome. Lots of people who are going on. Lena says, I fell for the Racoma sales pitch. 8 months in doing side learning, digitizing machine. I'm finally taking the huge leap and dedicating my time to the dream. Embroidery. Awesome. Awesome. Like I said, fantastic that you're doing the time of the dream. Hey, you know what? I know people who are on their Racoma machines and happy. I haven't been as happy with kind of the experiences I've heard, but I'm not the only person who's out there. If you find people and they're very happy with it, it might also be, it depends on where you're from and who you're working with. Depends on how close someone is for service, and we'll get there. Mark says, my digitizing software Stitch Area Liberty was included in my Avance 1501. Did anyone else use that software? I have used that software. I have a copy of Sierra, believe it or not. Not my favorite, but it does work. You can make it work. And the thing is, someone who knows embroidery well enough, someone who knows the basics, why do I always teach those elements of embroidery? Why do you find me teaching things at this really essential level where I talk about the nature of individual stitches and putting them together and combinations of stitch types and how they interact? Why do I do that? Because anyone who knows that can take any software and make something happen, and generally can make something good, because the truth of the matter is we only ever have one stitch. The only stitch that we have comes from one point to another point, and everything else is just a combination of these straight stitches. That's anything we make can be made with a single stitch. If you have a manual stitch tool in your digitizing software and enough time and gumption, you can make anything you've ever seen in machine embroidery because of the way the machine works. However, software is going to make that easier for you. It's going to provide automation for things that should be automated, that don't take away from your creative control. And it's going to provide you with tools that make it easier to draw shapes, to apply stitches, and to have automation of filling with different stitch types that are useful to you, that are good for your style. But any software that can make a stitch can be used. It doesn't necessarily mean that every software is equal. And like I said, I've used the lot. From, you guys know, as Wilcom for a really long time. I've used Pulse for a fair period of time when I was in a shop that did Pulse primarily. Melco Design Shop earlier on in my career. The first one was QDT I used from Moritz. So this is a special software that was made by essentially a badge company. So they're still out there. Moritz Embroidery Works, who makes badges and patches. They had a digitizing software back in the day that ran on DOS, and that's what I started on. So all of those, and now I'm using Stitch Artist fairly frequently because I'm working for Embrilliance and working on their assets. So I digitize in Stitch Artist a lot. I still use Wilcom too, because I still keep a copy of that. That's what I used for the largest portion of my career. I've used the lot, and honestly, I can make any of them do what I need to do. But each one of them has strengths and weaknesses, and it really is about which one works best for you. So, like I said, those are the two I keep current copies of, obviously. But I'm working on stuff for the products we have in the background of Brilliance. You guys have seen a lot of stuff I've worked on in Merrily, and you've seen recently the stuff I did for the Renaissance collection. Those were all done, of course, natively in that software, because as you know, native files, working files, work in the software that they are made in. But if someone is here to tell me, hey, I have to do this particular kind of work, I can't do that work because I don't have the right software, a lot of the time that is not necessarily the case. And if you're having trouble with the basic tenets of how embroidery works, if you're looking at the basic kind of almost the scientific theory of how embroidery works, you're having trouble with compensation, you're having trouble with the way that your fabric interacts with your stabilizer and your design, there's no amount of software that's going to fix all of that for you. It's the knowledge of embroidery and the experience on the machine with the equipment and the materials together that's going to make or break your experience. It is the knowledge of the stitch and the interaction between those materials and what you're doing in the file that's going to make or break you, not the software necessarily. Doesn't mean there aren't great things in all the different softwares that can help you with parts of this. And certainly things like automated pull compensation or push compensation, underlay, things like that make it a lot easier than drawing it all yourself. And definitely it's not like the old days where folks were punching one stitch in at a time. The thing I will say about punching one stitch at a time is people had a lot of control back then, and they were able to do things that people sometimes don't imagine right now because they're used to using the automated tools. They don't think about using stitches in that way. And admittedly, because you have to be quicker and deliver faster than you ever have before, people are going to use automation to do as much as they can. But hey, like I said, when we talk about software and stuff, that's one of the things I talk about is you can make any software do something that works well on your machine if you know how embroidery works. And I'll say this too. Love the ZSK machines. You can make most things work on most machines. If you are doing fairly standard work on hats and flats and you're not doing something extreme, most machines are going to kick out a reasonable embroidered result that you'll be happy with. It's where we get into extremes. It's where we get into special cases. It's where we get into um, different kinds of automation and connection and networking where there are differences between what machines can do or are set up to do. And that's where we have to ask about specialty use cases. Or if we're doing the kind of work that requires a very specific kind of execution, we might want to talk to our clientele first. We need to know if that's where we're coming from. That's the kind of work we're going to do. We need to know about our audience, but then we want to talk to our vendors, our machine manufacturers, and say, hey, this is the work I'm going to be doing primarily. This is what I'm trying to do. And I want to know what is the right machine that does this for me. And here's the thing I'm going to tell you, you guys know I'm a big commercial machine guy. I've ZSK behind me all the time. And that's what I love to run on. You guys know that. But it's like I showed you last week where we talked about, I showed specifically Hand and Lock London, that's a storied company doing incredible creative work. They're doing pop-up shop embroidery. And as we saw, those were absolutely home level, what I would call prosumer multi-needle machines that they were taking to do pop-up decoration and personalization at those pop-up shows. People who are doing in-store decoration are using that equipment because it's lighter, it's easier to travel with. And some people elect to have that kind of equipment because what they do have in their locality is someone who will service or send back a home prosumer level machine to the manufacturer. They have people who will service that, but they don't have a commercial person who can come out quickly and service their machines. That can be one of the reasons you decide to go with a home style or prosumer level machine. It's always a trade-off. You guys know I've talked about this. I'm not going to belabor it because Ramon is going to talk about it tomorrow. You guys have seen my previous episodes. Home and prosumer level machines tend to be a little slower, often have a smaller embroidery area. Commercial machines tend to be faster, have a larger embroidery area, and tend to be able to do a little bit heavier gauge work. If we're working with heavier materials, tend to be a little happier doing that. And also, stacked up heavier embroidery in general. Yes, there are differences, but there are reasons, valid reasons why people in commercial spaces might want to use machines that don't look like everybody else's commercial machines that don't look like this. There's valid reasons for it. However, I will be honest and say most of the work I've done, most of the work you see from me happens on commercial machines like these, right? So there are reasons for all of these things. I want to talk about why we bring equipment in, what it makes sense to do to expand, and why we would want to bring on new skills as well. New skills, new equipment, and that can be software too. We'll talk about all of that, but I think I want to get to the why and the how we make those decisions for sure. Brendan says, see you at Long Beach. See you out there, Brendan. Happy to see you in there. We're old friend from the industry. We talked about that and worked together before over Deco Network. So we've worked a long time, and I love meeting up with everybody in the industry when we get to go to do these things. And Lena says, expos, this is when I wish I lived in America, only time. Yeah, I get it for sure. I get it. Absolutely. It's one of those things that people always tell me is they wish that I could get out overseas. And sometimes I think about it, but it's always hard to make that work. And we have a couple more people talking about stuff. Mark says, I'm making it work primarily thanks to your teaching. Thank you, Mark. Like I said, I like to make sure that things are universal. Would I love to see you on different software? Yeah, sometimes. There are things that are hard to do in certain softwares. So sometimes I want to bring people along. I show people a lot of the stuff that's in Stitch Artist 3, and I want them to use that stuff, but I understand that sometimes it's not what you got. So, hey, you work with what you have until you can get what you need. Rhoda says, my first software was the free version of Stitch Era. It doesn't have all the features, but it didn't pay for all the features, but it worked. Yeah, no, when that first came out, I was shocked. That was back in an era where essentially digitizing of that level was something you weren't going to get for free, not in any way, shape, or form at the time when I first saw that. And I was kind of shocked, right? But that's the thing. We all work with what we have until we get to where we need. I think that's a fair thing to say. But what we're looking for in the end is what problems can a new addition solve? And I think that's what we're going to get at. When we're talking about software or equipment, we should be looking at what can it do? What can this new addition do that solves a problem for me, that allows me to address my audience? Or, hey, if this is creative for you, my desire to do X kind of creative work better. What can it do to help me address these things better? Last comment before I get into the actual meat of the show. Lisa Shaw, good friend of mine, also an Embrilliance worker, does all that good work for us. Good afternoon, Eric. Almost missed this episode, but happy to catch it. Yeah, happy to have you in. Absolutely. Lisa always doing incredible work. And by the way, also showing people the range of what you can do with software and what you can do to make things awesome. She did a really cool piece earlier where she took apart an existing native font that we did and broke that out into its component objects because it was a native font. You can have those native objects and then replace certain pieces of it. Really cool stuff. So if you guys have seen me talking about working with stock designs, and I talked about what you can do if you actually have native files, native objects, go check out Lisa's last piece. She did this really cool work with the font where she combined a new motif into a multi-layer font. Really cool stuff. Fun stuff, more kind of in the creative space and the gift space. I could totally see making my own gift market stuff with this stuff. Loved it. Really cool kind of holiday themed stuff that she did. But that's the thing. You should really look at what those possibilities can do for you. That's the difference. What can I do differently or better if I make the purchase? So let's talk about this, right? The couple of things we were discussing. So we're talking about expansion in education today. That's really what we're talking about. So expansion can mean a lot of things. Certainly what it often means at the end of the year for people is buying new equipment, new software, new materials, something new. Education in this case, we're talking about the trade shows and learning and bringing on skills. And honestly, when I talk about education in this context, I'm talking about bringing skills in-house, bringing new also kind of new centers of profit. Sometimes if you're in business, that can be part of the education as well. But bringing in skills or bringing in things that you're already having done, like digitizing and bringing those in-house, that's some of the things we're going to talk about and kind of consider. So the first thing I'm going to say is this. We are all prone to a certain problem when we go to trade shows and when we see new things, and that's this right here. Shiny object syndrome. That's what I call it. You are delighted and amazed by something novel and interesting that looks very cool, and you think, man, all the cool things I can do with this. The one that I certainly have issues with sometimes myself, there's a lot of them. I remember back in the day, the big thing I wanted more than anything was a laser bridge on a machine. We had no right in the shop that was at the size we were at to do that. We didn't really have a market for it, but I wanted one. And also right now, what I hear a lot about is a color reel. And I have nothing against color reel, but color reel is a pretty good expense to put in. And it is a very specific kind of use case to do color reel. I'm now seeing it come in and be in some certain shops, and they're doing some really interesting projects with it and some nice kind of proofs of concept. So we'll get to see more of what's going on. But when you see stuff like that, you see the gradient off of a color reel, you're like, man, wow, I sure would love to have that. I sure would love to have that. Boy, I can imagine all the cool things I could do with that. And I think one of the problems we have, especially when we're in business, is that many of us are actually creative souls who want to make artistic work, who are not necessarily just in it because we're trying to sell things. Many of us were cool with embroidery. We're like, wow, embroidery is interesting. Or you're someone like me who worked in a shop while I was going and getting my education and thought, oh man, I love this concept of making this artistic thing on a computer that I can then bring out into the physical world with embroidery. And it was very cool. And if you're like me, sometimes you start to get these creative ideas in your head before you have any kind of business reasoning behind them. And you want that shiny object because you think about the cool things you can do, all the creative opportunities you have. But you may or may not be thinking about the potential it has for business or how I'm going to amortize this thing, right? So these are the things we kind of fight with, right? Shiny object syndrome is an issue. However, the other problem is this. Though it's very easy for me to give you this speech, and I'm going to give you part of this speech while we're going, right? What I call the pre-approved edition speech, which is once we've figured out that absolutely we have a clientele and we know for sure what we're going to do something and it's absolutely going to make a difference. We've plotted it all out. It's going to allow us to serve an underserved market. It's going to allow us to expand in a way that we expect and that we know is going to pay off. Then we can purchase something. This is a nice thing to want and to try for, and asking questions that lead you to this kind of state of knowing that what you're going to do has a high success rate, that has a high potential for success, is great. But The truth of the matter is that not all clients really understand what it is they want and need from the get go. And sometimes it is our role as consultants to show them things that are of interest to them and might solve problems. So I'm going to kind of say we should temper this, right? We shouldn't give into shiny object syndrome. No, we shouldn't just buy something because we think, all right, this equipment looks cool. I can imagine all the cool things I can do with it. We want to ask ourselves questions about it, but we probably don't want to live in a place where this is the only way we ever expand is with the pre-approved edition. There has to be a nice middle ground sometimes the choices we make, because the other half of this entire process for me is this one, which I tell you guys all the time: show the work you want to do. Usually the reason I say this is because people are having problems with showing the least profitable work out of their shops. And when they show the least profitable work, people ask them for that work because that's the kind of work they're showing. There is a second half to this, though. Yes, show the work you want to do to try and eliminate people from only seeing the work that is the most labor that doesn't have the best margins. So, yeah, show the work that is profitable to you so that you get profitable work. Don't just show your stunners, show the real work and get people on board. But that's the other thing, getting people on board. Sometimes, in order to build a clientele who wants a thing, we have to have an example of that thing for them to want. We're not always going to be able to come from a place where someone is already beating down our door asking for the thing that we need to expand into. And that can be any number of expansions. I mean, when we're talking about this pre-approved edition, it can also be that, hey, I'm working on a single head, but I'm getting tons of orders that are in the tens of pieces or more. And it would make a lot more sense for me to have a multi-head like this. I need to bring in the big ZSK instead of just the single head, right? I got the Sprint, and now I need the big boy. Sure. That's something that makes a lot of sense. That is very simple. But often when we're falling kind of prey to the shiny object syndrome, what we're actually doing is usually something creative, and it's not something that's that cut and dry. It's often we're looking to maybe a new print medium. We're looking to an entirely new process. We're bringing in sublimation or white toner transfer printing or a DTG machine or DTF machine, and we're doing heat press, something that maybe isn't part of embroidery. So it's a brand new kind of process. I think honestly, heat press is a great thing to bring in most embroidery only shops because it vastly improves your range. However, when we're looking at that, it can sometimes get the shiny object syndrome. And like I said, the color reel is one of those where it seems incredibly interesting because it allows us to do embroidery that we couldn't really do in the same way without it. But it may or may not actually apply to your clientele. It may not be the kind of pre-approved edition because it's fairly expensive and it is something that we're going to have to build. However, I'm going to say this: innovation probably does not happen until we do this, until we show the work we want to do. Innovation and new markets may not open in the way that you might expect. Now, I'm not saying everybody go out and buy everything and totally let yourself go to shiny object syndrome. However, I think we have to have a balance because I've spent a lot of my career kind of fighting for this, saying, okay, ask yourself the questions, which we're going to talk about anyway. But I do want to make it clear that I don't think the only way for you to expand is to go into it with all the safety in the world. I think what you should do is be safer. I think you should ask yourself questions. I think you should have a plan. But I also think that there is a realm of innovation, of movement, of expansion where you're going to have some risk involved. It's about controlling that risk, knowing what the risk is, and not overexposing yourself. That's more realistic. But everyone thinking that I'm going to have a full plan in place and always know exactly what's coming in off of a new project, that's probably not very likely. What I like to do is talk about different ways we can roll out. And I'm actually going to discuss kind of a stepped rollout of a new service or a new type of product and explain one of the ways that I've actually done this before. Because I've done this previously with sublimation, and I've seen people do this with other kinds of additional printing methods or additional equipment. And I'll talk about that. We'll talk about a stepped rollout of something, and we'll talk about that, how we kind of get to that stepped rollout where we do a little bit of a time and build ourselves into bringing something entirely in-house. We'll talk about that. Let's go ahead. And we got a couple comments on, so I'm going to go ahead and grab a couple comments from folks here. So yeah, we've got some stuff going on. First, I want to just go ahead and give Lisa some kudos because she did a really good episode. That was awesome. Lisa is such an outside the box artist. Sorry, some of that came out a little weird. Lisa says, thanks for the shout out. Yes, everyone has their center of profit. The gift market is yours. If you want to make a way to find your embroidery to stand out. Yeah. If you're in the gift craft table market, people are coming by and literally looking at your stuff, you absolutely have to have something interesting, novel, something that delights, and then something that catches the eye. And the kind of cool stuff that Lisa was doing absolutely makes that happen. But yeah. Lena says, I thought there was a condition for that. And Lisa also says this, yeah, shiny object syndrome, SOS. Oh my God, you've been following me around at the shows. Yeah, me too. Me too. I have shiny object syndrome. I'm not going to pretend I don't. All the stuff that I see, heck, I saw computer vision attachment of patches that ZSK USA, well, not Cena, the people who have ZSK in the US up north, they showed this piece where essentially a camera was looking at patches or decorations or prints, and it was aligning the embroidery design and either stitching on the patches or adding embroidery to an existing print. And you could stick that anywhere in that hoop, and it was identifying the image and then lining up the embroidery. Love that. Do I need that? I probably don't, but there's somebody out there who does. That's the thing. If it answers a particular question that you're asking all the time, like how do I get patches onto these garments? How do I align these appliques easily and make it faster? Because my entire business is pre-made appliques that need to be put onto, garments. Or let's say I was somebody who did patches constantly on garments. I can totally imagine that removing the need to align them would be something that would change my work, right? So yeah, I know middle America. Ramon is laughing. Up north, they're in St. Louis, middle America. It's up north for the Southwest, folks. Remember, I'm in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm a lot closer to the border than you guys are. Further up north than me, middle America. You're right. But yeah, that's the truth. And Letty says it can be yours too. I think for 38K in a climate controlled environment. Yeah, I mean, there are some drawbacks to things like the color reel, but I'm going to say this. If your business was about being seen, or you are doing like fashion or rapid prototyping of garments, essentially showing people rapid versions of garments for design or for fashion, or if you just wanted to build a business around doing crazy gradients and textures in color on embroidery, you could build that business. And because other people aren't in it, if you were marketing that business, you might be able to make that work for you. The thing is, it doesn't necessarily slot into an existing business model the way you might expect it to, but it does have new business models it might open up. And it really depends. I think sometimes also kiosk mode embroidery makes sense to me on that way, or digital embroidery. Let's say where we're getting a design from a select set of designs that are coming down from a website with personalization, then we immediately can throw them on a machine and we don't ever have to set the colors for them. That's interesting. They had to be digitized for color reel, as you guys know from in a previous episode, but it is interesting stuff. Yeah. And by the way, I love this, Mark. Me and you both, man. Stands up and clears his throat. Hello, my name is Mark. I'm addicted to shiny objects. Yeah, me too. Me too. And so Letty says the machine is just part of the equation you have to consider. Absolutely. It's part of it. Ramona says, I went to 6 trade shows looking at the same machines with each show before making my decision, and I'm very happy with that decision. Absolutely. And Lena says, take the risk. Yeah, sometimes you have to. Sometimes you have to. That's the thing. There will come a tipping point where you cannot advance until you take the risk. And here's the thing. There's also steps of risk you can take in between. And so we'll talk about that. But real briefly, let's just kind of go through this, kind of quickly, right? So I talked about shiny object syndrome. I talked about how you get that pre-approved edition, which is kind of know what's going on. But I also discussed how you want to show the work you want to do. And this is where I talk a lot about doing creative projects for yourself that you can then use as examples. That's what we're discussing here, right? So here are the questions I'm going to ask you for. So yes, it can be more than this. We're talking about equipment purchases. But this can also be about adding skills. And these are the questions I think all of us should ask no matter what we're adding to our shops. And this includes things that cost time. Education that we do that's free. Hey, the education you get from me that you're spending your hour and a half each week, try to make it an hour, but it rarely is. Those skills cost you time. That is an opportunity cost. You could be doing something else. Now, I know many of you are working while you listen to me, but you could be doing something else with this time. You have to think about that. Realistically, is there something that it costs? You have to think about what you are getting out of it. And here are the kind of things I'm looking for, right? Questions I want to ask about any equipment I'm going to get and any sort of skill I'm going to add or any education I'm going to do. What problem are you solving? What does the addition of this equipment, the learning of this skill, solve for me? Is there an existing problem in my shop that I am running into frequently? It's slowing me down. It's causing me trouble. It's making me less able to do what I need to do. What problem are you solving? That's one thing. The other kind of problem is, what problem am I solving for my customer? I have a customer and they are consistently looking for a garment that has X kind of decoration. Maybe I have to have a more durable kind of decoration than what I've been doing. Is there something I can do with a different material that's going to change that kind of decoration? They are doing this type of work and I can't do that currently. I'm outsourcing that. Could I be faster if I brought in X equipment and did that in house? Could I do a more creative version of this kind of fulfillment if I were more in control of it, if I had the skill to do the creative portion of this work, like digitizing? What problem are you solving? That's a good question to ask. There usually is a problem there, either your problem or a problem for your customer, the end user. That's another thing. And that can even be bringing in a new line of apparel, a new line of products that we're decorating. What problem does this new addition solve and make it worthwhile for me to spend my time and my investment, my monetary investment to bring that in? What problem are you solving? And I think there's a lot that goes into this because it's more than just that kind of problem. I mean, and I'll talk about the reasons to bring things in. It's not just a problem. It can also be something that we see as a potential benefit. So problem is not always the right word. This is kind of the design thinking. We're looking for a problem. We're going to design a solution for the problem. However, it can also be, how will what I'm bringing in improve life for me? And yes, I know I said life, and that sounds like a big word here, but we all know that we live in the work that we do. These are the hours of our life, whether we are working or we are not working. It improves our life if our work goes better. It improves our life if we are more profitable too. So how can I improve my life or the lives of my customers, my end users, the people who get to see or use the garments, the decoration that I'm producing, if I bring this piece in? So what problem am I solving, or what is it that I will improve about my life or theirs by bringing this in? These are good questions to ask, even if we are not fully working for that pre-approved version of this thing. It's good to know. If we're bringing in a new decoration method or a new product, who is the market? So I know this sounds like everybody would think about this ahead of time, and that I shouldn't have to remind anyone of this question. However, having worked trade shows and worked in a trade show booth, I have seen many people fall prey to shiny object syndrome, and they buy something so like, oh man, that would let me do X process. They're obsessed with the process because, like me, like a lot of you guys, they're really creative. They want to make cool stuff. And they're like, oh man, if I got a white toner transfer printer, I could print on anything. I could use the certain kinds of transfers to print on hard surfaces. I could print on this. I can print on that. I can add multimedia. I can do all this stuff. And they're doing that. But when you look at their current people that they're selling to, or the way that they're selling, they really aren't interested in those products, or they're bringing themselves into an entirely new product class where they have to learn new kind of creative method and language. And they now have to figure out where they're selling this stuff. It doesn't mean it's not a great idea. It means we should think about it ahead of time. Who is the current market, or how can I market to my existing customers and bring this value in? What value does this add? And what will I do to expand that market? And I know that seems kind of crazy. I'm already thinking about marketing and I haven't bought the equipment yet. Well, yes. If I don't have a solid concept of what I would do in order to bring more people to want said product, I need to stop and think about that. Once again, none of these are barriers that say you're never going to start or expand something else. I'm just saying, when you go to expand, asking yourself these questions will let you hit the ground running. If you decide to go through the process and get this expansion done, you're going to hit the ground running. And the funny thing is, I was going to talk about this later because I want to talk about reasons to bring products in-house. And I'm saying reason to bring anything in-house. Usually when I talk about bringing something in-house, I'm talking about digitizing. That's really the beginning of it. It can also be design work if you're doing primarily print, but whatever it is, usually this is about bringing a skill in-house. But one of these good reasons to bring anything in-house, it includes equipment, is this: anything that enhances your unique ability to deliver. Now, we're going to talk about this again in a second, but all the things I just talked about are part of this. What enhances your unique ability to deliver a solution to your current clientele or one that you want to serve? I mean, if we're talking about the existing questions that I just put up here, certainly it's great about looking about problem solving or how we're going to improve people's lives. It's good to think about that market, certainly. But I think part of that also is understanding expansion. This means we can be looking to add a new market. That can be part of what we do. Certainly, if we want to be in a slightly riskier position, but one that we think is going to profit for us, if we know that there is a market that is underserved that we can address, if we had something in house, whether that's a skill or a piece of equipment, that's a better bet than not asking this question. I know it sounds crazy, but I have absolutely seen people who just go, "Oh man, I always wanted to print a trophy. I always want to be able to make my own trophies. That sounds cool." And you ask them, like, do any of your customers want trophies, or do you have any trophy shops in your area, or have you ever sold trophies before? Is that something you were thinking about doing? Do you have a market for that? Do you sell to team sports? And so you think you could probably use trophies as an add-on, and like, oh, I just thought that was cool. Surprising how many people are there. I don't think you people who are here listening to me and who listen to me jaw on week after week are the kind of people who aren't having these questions in your mind. But I think it's worthwhile to stop and actually spend some time on these questions before you make the purchase and before you go to the trade show and before you sign up for the classes. I would love to have you guys in any of my classes just because I want to sit with you and talk embroidery and talk digitizing and have a good time enjoying the camaraderie of talking shop. But I would also love if something that I said helped you to do the work better that you intended to do and to serve your clientele better, or to do more creative work that you wanted to do. I'm hoping that it allows you to enhance your skill set and makes you more able to serve the market you want to serve, and that up to and including doing things creatively for yourself. But that's the thing. What problem are you solving? Who's the market for the thing that you're going to bring in? And what will you do to expand that market? These are just good questions to have under your hat. You should know the answers to these before we make the purchases. Otherwise, that's the thing. If you're going to a trade show and you don't have anything in mind for expansion, and suddenly you are taken very quickly with the concept that I must bring home X machine, just this provides you a check for shiny object syndrome to make sure that it's not just that. Hey, people sometimes succeed with shiny object syndrome because if they get energetic enough, here's the thing I'm going to tell you. If you are energetic enough about answering these two questions, who's the market for your new product and what am I going to do to expand it, and you follow through on that, you might take your shiny object syndrome and make it your thing. If you are super passionate about making a certain thing or about a certain process and you run it out and find those clients, you can make it happen. I just think that some people aren't thinking that way. And I like to have everyone come into things kind of educated and knowing what they need to do first. It's just how it is. So, all right. So Mark White has a good thing to say here. Problem solving. Be careful to stop when you solve the problem and don't keep working out to the point of wasting time on something that no one cares about. Yeah, absolutely. What I'll say about this, for me, this is also the classic kind of adage. Perfection is the enemy of the good. Perfect is the enemy of good. There's often these times where we get to 90% of something being perfect and it is just good. It is good enough to get out the door and it solves a problem. And we're refining. We spend like 80% of our time on the last like 20% of the refinement that we want to do. And it's not necessary all the time. I'm certainly one of those people who gets a little too much into refinement. I think it's a good instinct if you can get yourself to a point where you look for that higher quality refinement, but know when to quit. And same thing here. Sometimes you're trying to solve a problem that really isn't there. Or you're going to find that you're trying to remove labor from yourself or trying to use automation for something that it doesn't make sense to remove the automation or to move to automation if you really don't need that automation to be profitable. Sometimes that can be the case too. I've seen people go into wanting more equipment than they need because it turns out that they just don't like a particular part of things where it really makes sense to have a human being doing that work sometimes. And you can pay fairly for the human being and still have them doing that work. You don't necessarily need to automate every single piece of things. Whereas sometimes for scale, it makes a lot of sense. It really is about actually knowing the problem and solving it rather than looking for interesting solutions because you feel like doing that work. I mean, yes, there are always opportunities to skill up, to add more equipment, but it makes sense to know why you're getting into it and think about the actual return. So that's one of those things for sure. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and put this out here now. When we're thinking about any kind of equipment, I think we also have to think about when our return comes back. So what is it going to take for us to get the return? How long is it going to take for whatever it is that we bring in-house to actually start showing in our bottom line? So when will I see a return? It's a question to ask yourself as well. If I go on to sell this new product and I kind of have an idea of my pricing, what is it going to take for me to get a return out of it? this isn't the only question to ask yourself, but it is a question to ask yourself. You have to understand that anytime you take on new skills, new tools, you're going to have some downtime for learning how to market whatever you are now creating. And that is not going to be an immediate return unless you are completely, just like I said, you got people breaking down your door to do whatever it is. Either it's add volume or to do something new, and you already have the skill set. Maybe then you're going to see an immediate return. But generally, we're going to have part of our cost of ownership is that we have to amortize this cost over time, and we're going to be paying for this stuff. So we need to know how we're going to pay and how we're going to get a return in time. It's just worthwhile to see that stuff. So stopping at good enough, like Mark says, once again, my wife helps me to stop at good enough. Otherwise, I'll spend hours trying to make it perfect. Yeah, me too. It's something that it's hard for perfectionists to get by, but it's something we have to learn. Also, I like what Lena says here, because we talked about audience and context. She says, find the gap in the market. Mine is definitely cultural. Yes, absolutely. And in fact, that's something I've got up here ready to talk about. One of the things we have to remember is, just like I said last week, audience and context. Who are we selling to? And in context, what is this product going to do in that market that it's in? And how am I going to fit into that market? And how does this new product or this new service that I'm adding going to fit into my context, the current market that I'm in, the way I'm adapted, and the kind of clientele that I'm already selling to? How does that fit? Because we either have to make what we're bringing in fit into our current audience, or we have to seek a new audience that wants this thing that we're bringing in. The safer one is obviously being able to sell into your current context, but the other possibility is to seek that new context in which it is adaptable to have this new equipment, to have this new thing brought in-house, or this new skill. So it's stuff to think about. But really quickly, I'm going to go over something that you've seen before, and I actually showed it on screen for a moment. Part of what this came from is somebody actually asked me a question about a very old video I had online. This is from 5 years ago, and it is still as current as ever. Honestly, it's 5 things to think about before buying your first embroidery machine. And some of the things I say in this are the same things I say today. It has not changed whatsoever. So I'm not going to play that video for you or anything, but I'm just going to go very briefly over some of the points that I made about those machines, those machine purchases. First few things, especially because I talked about your first embroidery machine. I am going to say this discussion, the brand versus brand discussion, I often find to be less fruitful than you might think, because when I've been around the kind of folks who are doing this work all the time, I have seen people with every brand of machine doing good work. As I've said, you see them behind me. I love the ZSKs. Is what I'm running now. They run very fast and very smooth, and I love them. But I've worked on a lot of machines, and you can make work happen on the machine. So I think sometimes the brand versus brand fight, it's more about capabilities and service and those sorts of things. What I think is, if nothing else, I'm not saying that one's not better for you than another. There very likely are, and you need to talk to the vendors about what kind of features they have and about your particular use case. I think most of the time you're going to find that there's a brand that works for you that you love. Like I said, love these machines are behind me. It's not for necessarily that every brand is for everybody, or everybody's going to have the same experience with every brand, and that's okay. But the big thing I want to say is, unlike some of the things I've seen in other markets and other media, I would love for us not to have this fight as embroiderers in a way that we're calling someone else out. As I showed you with that example from last week, you can have full-on commercial, beautiful machines like this and still have a reason why you might run a different machine, or have kept around one of your earlier machines. I know a lot of people who started with one brand and then moved to another because it did something better for them, but still have the original machine around. There is no reason for us to ever have a brand versus brand fight where we're like, that decorator is not a real decorator. That's not a real embroiderer because they run home style machines. That's not a real embroiderer because they don't run the machine brand I like. That is a false kind of equivalency. Trying to say the no true Scotsman logical fallacy. No one who's a real decorator would run X machines. Okay. Everybody starts somewhere, everybody ends somewhere, and everybody has a use case that is particular to them. We can have that discussion some other time. Most of the time, you're going to find that what makes the most difference for your experience with the machine is whether or not you can get service or not. We'll talk about that, and how that service costs for you. When we're talking about the equipment purchases, I want to kind of leave that behind a little bit and just say these few things about our equipment purchases, right? We know what brands I like. You have a brand you like. It's not always what's necessary. And I'll say this, we all do embroidery, and the basic nature of the stitch doesn't change. And that means we can all share and all learn from each other. But these things do make a difference, especially if you're buying your first embroidery machine or you're expanding for the first time, new versus used. I'm not someone who says you can only buy new, you can buy used equipment. What I'm going to warn you about is if you have a unserviced used machine that has been sitting in someone's garage, that has been sitting unserviced for some period of time, and you don't have someone to look it over, buyer beware. Just like anything else you might imagine, someone will tell you, this car has only been driven on the driveway every other weekend by a grandmother who's never put her foot down. Sure, but when you don't have kind of a known quantity of service record for a machine, you don't know if it's going to work. And if you're new to embroidery or new to a particular kind of machine or equipment, getting a used machine might mean that when you're trying to learn, you're fighting a problem with the machine that you might not even know is there. You could be having problems with the machine and think it is the way that you're using it. It could be the other materials that are involved. And if the machine is not in good repair, it may be something on the machine that's causing problems for you. Or if it's just been out of service for a very long time, it hasn't been serviced or cleaned up or looked over, you might have problems that develop that you don't really understand and you might think are something you're doing and it is an equipment problem. So new versus used, just buyer beware. I'm not saying you can't run used. I'll say this: if you're in a shop and you're someone who's run a lot of embroidery machines, you know embroidery machines really well, you've got a better chance of making a used embroidery machine work for you because you know what it's supposed to do and you know when a problem is machine based or when a problem is in your digitizing or in something else that you're doing. You'll have some concept of where those problems come from. The other things are, like I said previously, what makes the hugest difference for most people in their experience of any equipment, and I do mean any equipment, is service and support. Who is it that is serving you? Who is it supporting you? And where are they in the world? And can you get a hold of them reliably? Are they there to help you? Do they have enough support in the official channels to make a difference for you? And this is something that I hear a lot for Embrilliance is people really love that we have a fairly active support and we have both official and unofficial. So what I'll talk about is this: official support. I put this in kind of scare quotes just to say, yes, it's official support. It's also direct support. This is support from the direct brand. So whatever you're buying equipment wise from the brand itself or from the vendor from whom you bought it, because it's often a vendor that's selling to you and not, of course, the direct company. When we're talking about cases like that, then there's two kinds of official support. There's support from the person who made the machine to manufacture, and then there's support from the vendor who sold it to you. And you need to look at kind of both of those. What kind of support can they give you? Are they giving you? Do they offer? Are they accessible? Can you talk to somebody? Can you make this thing happen in a way that makes sense for you and makes you reliable and keeps you running? That's something to look for. Official support, also documentation can be part of this. Do they have good documentation, good education as part of what they offer you from both the manufacturer side and potentially from the vendor side? All these things can be possible. And then community support. Community support is still important. It is not something that's part of your official package or that you buy, but if you have a vibrant, healthy community who's using a piece of equipment, a decoration type, or a piece of software, you are much more likely to get help on the ground floor when you just need help quickly, or to look up and find people who have already found solutions for a similar problem you may be having out there in the world of decoration. So these things are important. In general, though, you're going to find that these things, service and support, are going to be what really make or break your experience with any equipment. When we're talking about service, especially with embroidery machines, you need to know what is going to happen when something breaks. How am I going to get a technician out to see this machine? Or is there something else I have to do to get a machine to a technician? What does that look like? What are the costs involved? And how long does it take to go from a state of malfunction to a state of function? What is it going to happen? If something is not working, how am I going to have somebody out and work on it? And what are the kind of costs involved? And what this really means is you have to have an eye toward the total cost of ownership. Because the other thing people don't think about is once we implement something and we build a market to use a particular piece of equipment, when that equipment is down, we no longer can serve that market temporarily and we are out of commission. We need to know what it's going to take to get us back in shape and working. And often with embroidery machines, we may have to do things like fly a tech out or get them on a service round where they are going through multiple places in our area to do regular service or to do emergency service sometimes. And if it's emergency service and we absolutely have to have the machine, we may have to have somebody where we're flying them out, we're keeping them in a hotel, and we're paying for the repair. And if that's the case, we need to know what that costs. And at the very least, we need to know what it looks like, who's available. Is there a range of service technicians I can use? Who does somebody recommend? Like, does the vendor or manufacturer have a list of people for me to talk to? And what does that look like? It's part of the total cost of ownership. Things will eventually break. You will have a technician look at your machine, and it's worthwhile understanding that that's the reality. So service and support. Ask about service and support no matter what you're buying. Find out what the heck, little things like you would do as a consumer of any kind. Find out what the warranty is on your equipment. Find out what you have coming to you. See if there's going to be training involved. So, like official support. Is there a training session? Where is that training session going to be? Is it something that's remote? Is it direct? How long will it take me to book into a training session? And is that going to be something that's worthwhile? Do I need to get additional training to know what I'm doing? And if so, how is that done? Who does it? Is it available to me? Those are things to look at. And of course, community support. Can I self serve? Both official and community support. Do we have self serve education so that I can self support, so I can deal with that myself, or that I can talk to other people who are in the same kind of situation I'm in when I'm working with set equipment or software, or honestly, to some degree, when I'm working on a certain kind of set of skills? Can I work on these things myself? But especially bringing in equipment, will I have official support? Where am I getting my service from? Is there a vibrant community around this equipment or this type of decoration, whatever it is that I'm doing, so that I have help when I need it? That's all part of, to a degree, part of the total cost of ownership. I think that's worthwhile to think about. So these are the same things I've been talking about for many years, but I think it's worthwhile saying, because I think we get hung up on certain things that we don't really think about, these kind of things that are harder to put on a brochure, right? What's on a brochure are features. We can look at the kind of presser foot control we have. We can look at the way that our tensioning is done. We can look at the kind of cylinder arm we have, and those are real things. Being able to lift your presser foot, whichever way you do it, manually or digitally, so that you can work on thick materials, is great. If you work on thick materials a lot, or if you're doing stuff that requires you to do that, then absolutely having a machine where it's easy to lift the presser foot makes a difference. That's a machine you should look at, versus one where it's harder to do, or you're, actually setting things up in a more permanent way on your foot. I mean, that's the thing. Being able to do that kind of work is important. If digital tensioning is something you want to be able to do, where it's computer controlled tensioning versus manual tensioning, I like the manual tensioning knobs. If you're somebody who's changing tensions a lot for different kinds of thread or different kinds of embroidery that require you to reduce or increase tensions, then maybe you want to have a machine that has that digitally controlled. It could be a thing for you. Might be, might not. Having a small cylinder arm like these machines have, where you can get inside of pockets or inside of shoes or things that are different kinds of substrates you might not otherwise work on. Having a table so you can work on spans of fabrics. You can do large pieces, maybe having a multi-head with a large span, a large sash frame, so you can do big borders on home decor. Those are features. Those are the easy things to think about, and you can ask a vendor about, and you can get numbers. These things are harder to remember and hard to think about, but very much will be easy to explain later down the road as the markers of a good time had, of a good experience with a piece of equipment. Is there service and support, and how do I get it, and what did it cost me? And did I have good uptime, good reliability? And when I was down, how long did it get me back, to take from myself from dysfunction to function? And how much did that cost me? Those are going to be things we have to think about. So like I said, features are easy. Brochure bullet points are easy to find, and we should look at those. That's part of knowing our audience, our market, and our product. But the other stuff, the stuff that you can't show on a brochure quite as easily, or at least if it is shown, we still have to ask around to find people who are kind of going to give us the skinny on what it's like to really be an owner. That stuff is stuff that isn't always discussed, but should be discussed. It should be part of our questioning when we go in. And I think the good thing is, those of us who have worked with vendors over the years can tell you, hey, there is a difference there. And when we have personal relationships with our vendors or with our manufacturers, we can stop and say, this is the kind of relationship I had. This is the kind of help they're willing to offer me. This is the kind of official and unofficial support. This is the kind of documentation that's out there. And I think it's worthwhile to take a look at. So yeah, the other things we have to look at, certainly the same stuff I talked about earlier, whenever we're doing those purchases, it's all about problems you're solving, the market, how you're going to expand your market, especially when we're talking about a new decoration method. That's usually when that's the most important. But in any case, it really should still have something to do with our market, with our business, with our audience and context. But in the equipment itself, service and support, total cost of ownership. Make sure that's part of your discussion and not just brochure features. Brochure features lead, but the rest of that stuff is going to shape your overall experience. So have a couple of comments in here that are good. Lisa says 100% true. The person, their skill set is more important. Oh yeah. Talking about software, especially the person does just as much work as the machine to make it work well. Same thing. Yeah. Same thing with equipment too. If you don't know how to run the equipment, you're never going to get a good result out of it. You have to know that stuff. And as Ramona says, get a list of techs that service that machine. Yeah. Whatever machine you get, know where the service is coming from. Don't have that thing in your shop until you know who's there, who can fix it. It's just a good way to think about it. Or understand there's equipment out there that's replaceable. And we know that things like print heads on printers, you're going to replace print heads or you're going to replace printers, one or the other. Understand that that's coming for you. It's the people who go in and think that I'm going to make my initial investment and never have to deal with service or replacement that suffer. Know that if you buy a piece of equipment and expect it to operate for you over time, you will either be repairing it or replacing it, and eventually you'll be replacing it nonetheless. There will come a time where repairing it is no longer an option. There will be a replacement, and for sure, you're going to be doing maintenance and repair. If it's sitting in your shop, maintenance and repair are part of the deal. And as Rona says, make sure make sure anything you do to the machine doesn't void that warranty. Yeah. Know what your warranty is and know the terms. Always worthwhile. Always worthwhile. But let's go quickly. I want to talk about bringing in skills, bringing anything in-house. Many times we're going out to the trade shows, we're looking to learn skills. I know since I teach digitizing that a lot of the people I'm talking to in the commercial world are thinking about bringing digitizing in-house. Many of them have been having all their digitizing outsourced, and they're thinking about bringing those things in-house. But the thing is, I think that this really goes to both the equipment side, because I often talk about different decoration processes. Many times I've been discussing bringing in different kinds of print with embroiderers, and that's kind of one of the tacks I'm going to take here. But bringing in skills and bringing in additional equipment and additional skill sets, these can be kind of similar. But there are good reasons to bring anything in-house, and I think it really goes to this kind of argument. Anything that enhances your unique ability to deliver, that's going to be a good reason to bring something in-house. So that's print, that's other types of equipment, and that's skill sets. The thing you have to go through is this statement, right? It enhances your unique ability to deliver. There are different things that can mean, but the first thing I want to hit on this is unique. Yes, everybody who's in decorating has the opportunity to do a lot of the same things. We often have very similar makeups, similar abilities. However, the unique ability to deliver here means that we have a unique kind of mixture of our context and our audience, and our skill set allows us to deliver solutions to our particular audience or the audience we're chasing, we're looking for. That unique ability is the best thing we can bring in. If we have something that makes us more able than other people in our category to deliver, bringing that in is something that can drive interest, that can allow us to outcompete other folks in our segment. So that's why I say the unique ability to deliver. And the thing is, it cannot just be that we have the unique ability. It can also be that we are offering something that other people in the segment can't offer if they don't take on either the skill set or the equipment. And one of the things with digitizing, I've said this a million times, why did I do a lot of work for movies and TV back in the day? It's because having an in-house digitizer meant that someone could come from the creative team from a movie or from television that was filming out here in New Mexico, come to us, show up with kind of not a fully formed idea, but like concept work and artwork that's not quite ready for embroidery. And within the day, they could have someone look at it, prep it, show them a sample image that was the kind of interpretation they're looking to get, sign off on that, and have initial production samples done. Not having somebody in-house makes that a lot harder. Not impossible, but a lot harder. In-house digitizing for us allowed us to also pursue more creative options where we could look at different ways of fulfilling on a particular design goal or on a particular garment. And I could do the research and testing in-house, and it was very rapid. In-house digitizing made sense for that. That's a unique ability to deliver. And in that case, it was both for timing and for creativity. Those are good reasons to do digitizing in-house. Now, bringing in print. Same thing for us. We brought in sublimation. Why? It allowed us to do digital decoration. We did a lot of sublimated patches is one of the things we did the most of. Digital full color decoration on polyester patches very quickly. We used those once again for the movies and TV. Also for doing things like events where they had multiple personalized patches where they wanted different icons or names on almost every single patch. And we could do that with digital production in a way that we couldn't do that necessarily as easily with embroidery. It let us do these things quickly and it sped up our ability to deliver. Also, it let us do multimedia things with embroidery that allowed us to use a full color print in applique and in other contexts around patches. So multimedia was something that not everybody could do, and delivering quickly from the design state to the final piece is not something not everybody could do, and delivering digitally highly personalized pieces was something not everybody could do. So bringing in sublimation for us enhanced our unique ability to deliver. So custom printed appliques was something that wasn't being done by other shops around us. Unique ability to deliver, unique market, and we had a market that was truthfully already kind of clamoring for these options because I realized it was answering questions. One of those questions, one of those problems being, can I get patches made today for 10 different designs and they have to be full color and they have to be done now? Digitizing all of those and embroidering all of those wasn't necessarily the best option. Being able to put an embroidered edge on a sublimated patch, I could definitely get that done in the same kind of time period. Unique ability to deliver against a problem. However, there's a spectrum on this stuff. So enhancing your unique ability to deliver, good reason to bring things in-house. But what I'm going to say is if it's not super time-based, if it's not something where we're talking about the immediacy of doing film and TV stuff like I did, we can actually go through a spectrum. So let's say we want to bring something in-house and we have a good reason. We have a unique ability to deliver that it's going to add for us. But we want to do it in a staged way. So we want to have like a staged rollout, right? A staged rollout or introduction. The thing is, the first thing to remember is outsourcing is not a dirty word. We can outsource and we can still outsource to local businesses. If when you hear outsourcing, what you hear is that I'm going to dump all of my work on someone else cheaper, outside of the country, and you don't like that, okay, cool. Whatever country you're in, if you want to keep it local, outsourcing can still be done local. It's fine. What outsourcing means in this case is just having some other shop doing a portion of your work and being the go-between for that shop and your client. In that case, that's all I mean by outsourcing. And what I'm going to call it is this. I'm going to say that there is a spectrum of fulfillment. The reason why I'm saying this is that you don't necessarily have to do everything yourself. There's nothing necessarily that makes you more authentic that you do every single thing yourself. Or you don't always have to do it all yourself, or you don't have to do it for all yourself immediately. So this is what I mean. Many of us like to do a staged introduction or a staged rollout. This is what I'm talking about. Let's say we've had the idea. We've defined the problem. We've defined the audience. We know our audience in context, and we have a really good reason to bring it in-house. It's going to enhance our unique ability to deliver, but we don't want to bring it in-house yet, or we want to kind of let it prove out and have it be more of an addition that makes sense to us that we can prove. Well, the thing is, you can start it out on this spectrum of fulfillment, have other people fulfill portions of this work, and potentially you will have less profit during this point, but you'll be able to do this kind of work and test it out and see if it works in your market. So in doing a staged rollout, there's a few different ways we can handle this. Let's say first, we have our preliminary research. We're like, all right, we're going to find out what this product is, what this equipment is, what it can do for us, and what its capabilities are, right? So what are these capabilities? Preliminary research is just us figuring out what it is, getting our head around it, and answering our initial questions, right? The questions that we asked earlier. What problem are we solving? Who's the market for the product? What will I do to expand that market? Should probably all be part of that preliminary research, as well as the abilities that it gives us. What is that unique ability that we get from this new product or from this new skill set we're trying to add? Then we want to gather some customer insights. Now, this can be as simple as looking at social media groups that contain the kind of people who are in your clientele. This can be literally asking people in your current clientele, say, all right, you've got good clients. Is there something you want? Is this particular thing I'm looking at something that's interesting to you, and why or why not? Or you can go down to the point of research. You can go out and start looking for groups, looking for other people selling the same kind of work you're trying to do, and look at what their clientele looks like and where they're marketing, and just gather customer insights. What's interesting to people? What makes them tip? What is it that they need? What can I do to solve a problem? And what is it that this particular technology I'm trying to add or skill set I'm trying to add can do for them? What are the ways that this will enhance my unique ability to deliver? And what problems am I solving for them? What can I do? So gather those customer insights and also gather the insights within your own shop to say, all right, how does this fit with what we're currently doing? What is it going to look like for us to do it? And does it make sense? Gather your insights. So, preliminary research, you know what it is, gather your insights, you have an idea what customers want, and you have an idea how it's going to fit with you. After that, we can go through further kind of stages, right? With this stage rollout, we do some initial training. We learn a little bit more about it for ourselves, but we are on the spectrum of fulfillment. We can also start hiring part of this out. So let's say we want to have sublimated gear. Cool. We find a sublimator and we hire it out. Or let's say we already have a heat press. We've been doing something like applique that requires heat press, or maybe we even have a cut vinyl printing that we're already doing. We have someone print us sublimation transfers and we bring those in-house and we do the transfer portion ourselves without buying into the printer and without doing the design work ourselves. We can use the spectrum of fulfillment to get going. We do our initial training so we understand what it is we need to know about this process or about this skill set, but we have someone else handle it at the beginning so that we can start seeing what this stuff does and we can start doing testing. We can do testing in self-directed projects. So once we know a little bit about what we need to know to be able to fulfill this, we can start testing for ourselves and doing self-directed projects. Now, we can still be on the spectrum of fulfillment here, but at this point, we may already have purchased our equipment. If we're pretty sure about it, we've got our customer insights, it looks like it's going to work out for us, then we can move into training and doing our initial testing. But whether we're using someone else to fulfill or we're doing it ourselves, this is a good time to do some self-directed projects. This is where I say, do your shop shirt, do your creative work, look at a customer that you think this would serve and offer to do a job for them that is at a discounted rate so you can test it out, or see if they can add it to an existing order or are willing to do so you can test this out and have this there and have a proof of concept. Self-directed projects are great because you can do them for yourself where you don't have any other restrictions, and you can specifically tailor the kind of artwork that you use or the kind of product that you make to what you think is going to be interesting to people or what shows off the process best. And we start with those self-directed projects and we start putting those out and showing those in our social media, in our showrooms. We make sure that people start to see what's happening with that and what are the possibilities. What can we do with those things? But like I said, at this point, we still may be having somebody else fulfill orders for us and being a middleman, or we might still be having people do things like bring in some portion of that labor if we don't want to have the full equipment. If we do, though, we can start doing those self-directed projects in-house. After that, we get to the test order stage where we start offering this up to our best clients, or we start a soft rollout. That's one of the ways you can do it, where we don't necessarily just throw this out there and start marketing like crazy. We just make it available to the people who we feel like we can work with and start showing what it is that we can do with this new process. So we start doing test orders. And that's a way to just get our feet wet and get that work started. Once we have test orders in hand, we know what we're doing. We've got our feet under us. Maybe we have done some stuff with someone else. We've done the stage introduction. We've had someone else that we've worked with kind of help us out or fulfill the actual product. And then we've delivered it. We've learned some of the ins and outs of what we're going to have to do on the lead end to show this work, to sell this work, and to make it happen on the creative side. Then we do those initial test orders. We're happy with those. Then we go into full marketing, full rollout. We start marketing it. We start showing people what it is that we can do. We start explaining it, and then we fully roll it out. It becomes part of our product mix, and we offer it regularly with the rest of the stuff that we're already familiar with. So that is one way we can kind of do a staged rollout. And like I said, in that, we have that. When I call it a spectrum of fulfilling, the reason I call it a spectrum is because at any time in this process, and even at any time fulfilling this, we can still lean back on different ways of handling this. If you're doing a sublimation and the first thing you do is you start out by having a desktop sublimation machine, so you're only able to do a certain size pieces, maybe you only have a 13 by 13 area you can print, and you start making some small desktop sublimation pieces. They're a little bit higher priced because it tends to be a higher rate to deal with materials in the desktop side versus a wide format. And so your first sublimation work, that's the kind of stuff you're selling. But then suddenly you have somebody who comes to you, you need to do a larger order with more pieces than you're used to, with larger decoration space than you're used to. You can still outsource that while you're learning your initial work and before you move up to the next size machine. And I think that's fair with anything. Same thing with embroidery. You find yourself, you were originally a single head shop, you're doing lots of creative work, you're doing lots of boutique work, but you stumble into the ability to kind of secure customers that have lots of uniform work, work that is going to be the same type of decoration on the same garments for tens or hundreds or thousands of pieces. You can also do the stage fulfillment trick where if you want to get into production, start by outsourcing it to a contract decorator and being the middleman doing the creative work because you understand embroidery and that's worth something to sell to somebody. You are the consultant. But you can, if you decide to move up to then multi-head machines, you can then start looking at that as you build clients, as you build clientele who needs that. And by the way, that's not one client. I know sometimes it can be very tempting. I don't love to see people necessarily buy a bunch of equipment, buy themselves into a commercial location if they only have one big client that they're serving. I have seen shops kind of have a bad time when that client either decides to bring the embroidery in-house because they have such a need that they decide to essentially run an internal embroidery shop for large corporate clients. I've seen that happen. Or that they just move from one shop to another. They move to another contractor and you've kind of skilled up and tooled up and you didn't sign a big contract with them. And now you don't necessarily have that client. So what I would say is the best thing you could do for that is build up your clientele while you're on the spectrum of fulfillment, having someone else do some of that work, taking less profit for yourself, and then tool up when it makes sense for you if you want to do that production. The other thing is you can maintain yourself on this kind of realm forever. If you want to be someone who it's like, I know the right people to deal with, I can prepare art for embroidery, I can help you get to those contractors and work with them. But any small stuff, any overflow, smaller orders, personalized orders, I do in my shop, but the rest I send out to contracting. If you're clear with that and you can make it work, that is a fine place to be. And you don't need to feel like you're less of a decorator for not taking it on yourself. I think that's the funny thing. We often think we need to be the one-stop shop when it doesn't always need to be the case. There are entire distributors that is what they do. Promo products world is full of people who don't create or make or print or stitch anything. They know how to put together a good package. They know who to call when it comes time to get something made, and they pull the levers and arrange the orders. And that's a valuable service for someone to give. So you can do that too. So just remember the spectrum of fulfillment. You don't necessarily have to take it on yourself, but if you do, you can elect to do a staged rollout where we go through those steps of research, insight gathering, training for yourself, doing some self-directed projects so that you can get your feet wet, test orders, and then going to that full market, that full rollout where we really make it part of our work. Now, the last couple of things I want to say, as for bringing in new skills and reasons to bring anything in-house, like I said, though what we're trying to look for is enhancing our unique ability to deliver, there's many ways that can happen. And I just want to kind of list some of that stuff. Creative reasons. If having a piece of equipment allows you to do a different, more creative, more interesting visual style, that can be a reason to do things. Or bringing digitizing in-house. If you feel that you have a way of interpreting art that's going to be different, that will enhance your ability to sell, that is absolutely a reason to bring something in if your market is served in that creative way. If you have a very kind of commodity market that's very utilitarian, then think of it that way. If the thing you're bringing in adds additional utility, it allows you to decorate something you couldn't have otherwise. People who are doing patch hats all the time, many of them find in a very utilitarian way, even though it can be kind of creative or interesting to have a real sewn-on attachment instead of trying to mess around with heat press maybe, or working on, working with embroidery machine attachments can be difficult. They'll bring in a post-bed machine and they'll have somebody learn how to manually stitch patches on hats. That can be a fairly utilitarian option, but it allows you to do something you couldn't really do otherwise and makes it a little easier. But that really is a new skill set and a new piece of equipment. It's utilitarian, but it adds utility. If your market really wants patch hats or, hey, Letterman jackets, we did a lot of sewing patches into the sleeves of Letterman jackets that could have been very well served by having a cylindrical bed machine or a post-bed machine instead of the classic flatbeds that we had. Utilitarian reasons are worthwhile reasons to bring something in, and it does enhance your ability to deliver quickly and to stitch on certain things that would be much harder to stitch on without those machines. So that's a utilitarian reason. It adds additional utility. Other things, schedule-based, if it makes you faster. Like I said with the movie people, being able to do sublimation printing very quickly in-house, being able to digitize and deliver creative kind of previews in-house, to be able to show things quickly in-house was absolutely a schedule-based reason to do these things. Also, the ability to do things like create online stores very quickly in-house allowed us to do some interesting things with company stores and with event work. Those are schedule-based, makes you faster, makes you be able to deliver on time. Those three things are all worthwhile. But the other thing I want you guys to think about is that many of the times when we go out to get classes in, to go do education, it's really easiest for us to do production or creative skills, right? And I'm somebody who teaches this stuff. So I know this is something where you're like, wow, Eric, this sounds like it's against your own best instincts to talk about this stuff. Now, I teach things that are outside of digitizing and outside of embroidery. I teach e-commerce, and I also teach marketing for embroidery and for digitizing sometimes. But the thing is, creative and production skills are easy. Everybody wants to learn a new way to do some digitizing, a new way to stitch things, a new material, a new process. That's something that those of us who are very creative are kind of geared toward doing. We want to do these things, but I want you to consider non-decoration skills. They're not always taught on the show floor primarily, and maybe you find that you need to go to another location entirely to get these skills. Maybe you're on LinkedIn Learning, maybe you're on Skillshare, who knows? Or you go to the shows and you look for the classes on marketing, the classes on sales, the classes on business management, on informational workflow, which I've taught multiple times. You look for the classes on reliability. You look for the classes on e-commerce. Learn non-decoration skills. I cannot tell you how many times somebody has come to me with a problem, and most of the problem sounds like a non-decoration problem, a business skill problem. And a lot of that certainly is marketing and sales, where somebody continues to try and get more creative and production skills, continues to try and buy equipment to answer a problem. They're making equipment purchases. They're learning creative skills because they're like, I'm not getting enough orders. It must be my lineup. And then when I stop and talk to them, I find out that they've done very little work on how they're presenting things to the customer, what kind of marketing they can do. They're not hiring anybody to do that marketing. They don't have an easy way to purchase for them. They don't know how to do e-commerce. They haven't thought about the customer experience in buying from them. They haven't thought about their customer service. And in the end, I look at it and go, you know what? Your embroidery is fine. Maybe you need something else there, but there are plenty of people who are selling normal embroidery without multimedia and doing well. It's not that you might not want to add that you might not find a good market for that. Or like I said, with the patch hat thing, you find that all of your customers love patch hats, then you better learn how to do patch hats. Absolutely, that can be part of it. And that can be a creative thing. You want to learn how to work on patches specifically? I've taught many classes on patches. Small run patches might be a really great profit center for you. However, nothing that you do, nothing that you add is going to sell unless you market. And no business that you run will get better for having more creative abilities if you don't know how to run the business itself. I'm not saying I have all the answers to this, and I look to people who are smarter than I am sometimes to do this sort of thing. I've always said this, kind of the example I've come up with is if you come to me to talk about e-commerce, I can absolutely tell you everything inside and out because I've run a lot of e-commerce stores. But if you talk about formulating a local business and taking on small business loans in your particular region, I'm going to send you to somebody else because that's something I haven't done as much. Most of my work has been under an existing company and running e-commerce channels and e-commerce stores, but the base work underneath it and the work that had to be done with employees, most of that I didn't do. So I'm not the person who's going to teach you that, but there's somebody out there who will. And I think that's the true nature of an expert who's teaching you something from the heart that they understand is going to be someone who's much better suited than someone who just pretends they know everything. But the thing I'm going to tell you is it's an important skill. And just because I'm not teaching it or it's not taught necessarily at the particular show you're going to doesn't mean it's not important. There are generic universal business skills and non-decoration skills that are super important to making sure a business runs. The way you handle customers, the way you handle your money, and the way you handle your employees is super important to making sure you are successful. These are worthwhile to listen to. These are things you should be learning. They don't have the glitz and glamour, and they absolutely don't serve the shiny object syndrome that you get from all of the creative types of classes, but they are absolutely critical to your success. All right, folks. So with that, I think we're coming down to the end. I've got one last comment here, but it looks like Jo Rita says she doesn't sell, but she's watching and listening anyways. Thank you, Jo Rita. Here's the thing. Even for creative people, I'm going to say this. there are still things to think about for those of you who are just doing creation and art. And the thing is, no matter what it is that we're looking at, when we're trying to add something to our lineup, and this could be in our lives, this can be in our businesses, this can be in our creative work too. As an educational embroiderer, sure. As somebody who is a creative embroiderer, sure. As a commercial embroiderer, absolutely. We're still working with one thing that's common to all of us, and that is limited resources. That can be money, that can be time. The thing is, there are lots of wonderful, worthwhile things out there. It's about understanding what problem it's going to answer or how it's going to impact your abilities. It's something that I like to look at, especially, like I said, uniquely increasing your ability to serve a purpose. Now, whatever purpose that is, that's your purpose. That's what you have to figure out. But if you have a unique ability to deliver, and that can be given to you through the addition of a piece of equipment, through the addition of a piece of software, through the addition of a skill set that you'll have to learn, that's something that's worthwhile to bring in-house, whatever in-house is to you. I know it's something that I think about with the products we do. When we made the Renaissance project, if you're an Embrilliance person and followed that, one of the things that Brian made back in the day and that then we refined and worked on were these fonts that made huge monograms up to a foot, a scalable font that went up to 12 inches. Something cool and unique, things like that. Unique tools are something that gives you an ability to deliver you might not have had otherwise. That is rare in the game, but you may find that. And if you do find that, that's something that's a little easier to make the call for. And like I said, with any other type of equipment, instead of just being shiny object syndrome, you can go for the questions that give you the pre-approved edition. But ultimately, you're going to have to show the work you want to do and decide the kind of work you want to do and find the context and audience if you don't have it already. But like I said, ask yourself the questions that I've said multiple times now. What problem are you solving? How are you improving your life or someone else's with this work or with this equipment? Who is the market for your new product? Or what will you do to expand that market? Who are you going to find as a market for your new project or skill? And ultimately, it's about knowing what is uniquely going to enhance your ability to deliver on the thing that you want to deliver, whether that is self-expression art, whether that is to your customers, like the work that I've done in my time, or whether it's something else related to your business. Knowing that audience, that context, and the condition for success that is important to you will help you to make those decisions and not just fall victim to shiny object syndrome. There are very worthwhile things out there. Go out there, take the risk when it makes sense. Work with other people on that spectrum of fulfillment if it doesn't make sense just yet. And know that sometimes it's worthwhile. Get out there, take a little risk once you've asked yourself those questions. All right, folks, with that, we will have another show next week. That's the plans for right now. I know not as many people are going to be there present as we get into the holidays. After that, though, the week after that is definitely off. Next week should be a show, might be pre-recorded, but will be a show coming in next week. Plan to do something fun and more creative. But for right now, had to answer these questions because I had a lot of people breaking down my inbox asking, how do I make this call about equipment? So with that, folks, take care of yourselves. I know this is a busy time. Take some time to breathe. Remember that your purpose is to be here, be alive, and live well as helping everybody else. If you are one of the people who serves, take a moment to make sure you take a breather. If you are not okay, you cannot help someone else when you are depleted. So take a rest, take a breather, and stop and smell the roses. Look at the pretty lights. And I cannot wait to see you guys here again next week.